Good evening. Welcome to The Report with me, John Rees. On tonight's programme, we'll be taking a look at the IVF treatment in the UK in the light of the debate around the controversial third donor law. And we'll also be examining worrying statistics revealed by Cancer Research UK that show a rising number of victims of the disease. But first, after the release of an horrific video yesterday showing the killing of a Jordanian pilot by the Islamic State group, the country vowed revenge. And this morning, the Jordanian state executed 2 Al-Qaida prisoners. Yasmin Khatun has been following the story.
Early this morning, Jordan executed 2 convicts, including failed bomber Sajida al-Rishawi, following the killing of Air Force pilot Muaz al-Kasasbeh. The executions of Rishawi and Karboli, 2 Al-Qaeda-linked individuals, come hours after the Islamic State group posted a video appearing to show the Jordanian pilot being burnt alive. Jordan had attempted to secure Lieutenant Kasasbeh's release in a swap involving Rishawi, though doubts emerged over whether Kasasbeh remained alive. Jordanian state television declared that the pilot had been killed in early January. Kasasbeh was captured by IS after his plane crashed over Syria while on a bombing mission against the group in December. The video of the pilot emerges just days after another, depicting the killing of veteran Japanese journalist Kenji Goto, as world leaders reinforce the need to strengthen the fight against IS.
Secretary General condemns the killing of Jordanian Royal Air Force pilot Muaz al-Kasasbeh by Daesh, a terrorist organization with no regard for human life. The Secretary General's thoughts are with Mr. al-Kasasbeh's family and loved ones. He shares their sorrow and stands today in solidarity with the government and people of Jordan in denouncing this appalling act. The Secretary General urges all governments to strengthen their efforts to combat the scourge of terrorism and extremism within the bounds of their human rights obligations.
Many in Jordan have questioned its role in the airstrikes against IS, but following the killings of its pilot, the government has reaffirmed its stance and has vowed an earth-shattering response, a move seemingly in line with public opinion. IS have come under increased military pressure from airstrikes and a push by Kurdish and Iraqi troops to reverse the territorial gains in Iraq and Syria. The White House has also said the intelligence community was studying when the video was recorded and that President Barack Obama has ordered his team to devote all resources to locate other hostages held by Islamic State. Following the horrific nature of the attack, it seems the fight against IS has entered new ground with greater resolve. King Abdullah defended his role as part of the coalition against IS, saying that Muslims needed to combat a group whose ideology and brutality insulted Islam.
We meet with great sadness, despair and anger following the martyring of the heroic pilot Muaz al-Kasasbeh. May God bless him. At the hands of the cowardly terrorist organization, Daesh, which behaved in an extremely wrong and criminal way that has nothing to do with our noble religion.
The question on the lips of most Jordanians now is how he will avenge Kasasbeh's death. Yasmin Khatun, The Report.
Well, joining me to discuss this are Sabah Al Mukhtar, who's president of the Arab Lawyers Association, and Akbar Ahmed, who is a journalist at the Huffington Post. Welcome to the programme, both of you. Sabah, every time one of these horrific killings takes place and every time one of the grisly videos is released, the world leaders say that they're going to do more to combat IS. Are they actually getting anywhere?
Well, actually, one must express really the disgust with what has been done. This attitude, although it's been practiced by a variety of societies, and it was for treason, it was for witchcraft. The last action was in 1980 in state penitentiary in New Mexico, where the inmates burned some of them. So there are, these are horrific actions. But I think the reaction, which is now we're hearing, there is also this. There's first of all the Jordanian one, which is trying to justify it. Everybody is expressing their resolve to do something, but one wonders what are they really doing, when in fact the message that must be understood from this event, and this is where I think the importance is that threats by ISIS and deadlines means deadlines. The second thing they wanted to pass the message is that if you are trying to team up with the Americans, then you must be prepared to pay the price. That's why, for instance, today the first reaction was the United Arab Emirates decided to suspend their flights after they used Maryam al-Mansouri, one of their pilots, to go and bomb before. I don't think we must make it a media idea. I don't think this is how you fight wars. If you fight wars with ordinary armies, that's fine. But when you have militancy like this, and you don't fight ideas by bombing. You fight ideas by removing the cause of these wars and terror acts, because people are behaving in a way which is not consistent with religion, ethics, or morality, because they feel so aggrieved. And I think we need to address this one rather than pretending that we're going to send more airplanes and we can do this thing. I don't think the Jordanians can do the earth-shattering something. I think they were within their right to hang some of the two people. They can hang probably a few others, but I don't know how much they can do, especially when one looks at the situation in Jordan itself. The Jordanians have a dual
Sabah, before we get on to that, just let me bring Akbar in. Akbar, what do you think the great powers think they're doing here? Do you think they think they're actually pushing back the Islamic State?
That's certainly the rhetoric coming out of Washington, John. There's a big, there's constant claims about we've killed this many top ISIS leaders, we've killed 6,000 ISIS fighters so far. The problem with those kinds of numbers, of course, is that ISIS is gaining 1,000 fighters per month. So if you've killed 6,000 so far, that's not getting you very far. I think that the great powers, particularly the U.S., are expecting their Arab partners to play an even greater role following this. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to be the case. As Sabah mentioned, the UAE had stopped sending bombers following the shooting down of the Jordanian pilot back in December. That revelation was made last night. Jordan's King Abdullah was in D.C. actually yesterday when this news broke, and a lot of congressional leaders, the president, all of whom spoke with him, said, we believe Jordan will continue its resolve. Now, the place where Jordan needs to draw its military support from is actually the south of the country, a place where people are saying this is not our war. We don't want to be dragged into American wars anymore. This is where Muaz al-Qasasbe's family came from. This is where you actually saw some pro-ISIS protests last year. And so internally in Jordan, although it is an authoritarian government that can control its population, there's certainly more dissent than we've ever seen before. And King Abdullah is facing a lot of pressure to not look like a U.S. proxy.
Okay.
His being in Washington at a time of national tragedy didn't help with that effort.
Okay. Sabah, is that your take as well, that in fact, although understandably there'll be a reaction among ordinary Jordanians about the killing of the pilot, that in actual fact, on the question of whether or not they should be committed to the American fight with ISIS, it's a lot more divided in that society?
Yes, certainly. I think there is a situation that although the Jordanian population are against the regime in Syria, they are against the ISIS and the Islamist movement there, but there is a large constituency which believes that they should not be against the Islamist movement, but only against Assad. At the same time, the Jordanian government has gone a little bit too far as the cooperation with Europe, generally speaking, and with the USA. There are US troops there, there are British troops, there are French, and there are others in Jordan. And the Jordanians are saying this is not our war, and we should not have sent Qasasba there. So there is this feeling, but at the same time, there is a great deal of anger, and people want something in return, but states do not operate on revenge. Revenge is a concept which is linked to human beings. When you have this, you become irrational, so you want revenge and what have you. Jordan has to actually think carefully what they can do. They don't want to pull out. I don't think they will go any further. Probably they will hang a few more people. Probably some more security measures will be taken within the country. But I think the idea that they are going to shatter the earth, because if the US and 60 other countries, don't forget, we have a coalition of 60 countries, have been for the last 6 months at least, trying to get rid of this. I don't think Jordan alone can do very much. And the idea that the Arab countries should do the work for America and for Canada and Australia and Belgium and Britain and the rest of it is a little bit too much to ask for.
OK, well, just hang on there a moment, both of you. Stay with us, because before we continue the discussion, we're going to have a quick look at the reactions from Turkish President Erdogan and from Prime Minister David Cameron.
Bakın ben bu vesileyle DAEŞ'in Ürdünlü pilotu yakma eylemini şu anda huzurlarınızda telin ediyorum. Lanetliyorum. Bakıyorsunuz biri çıkıyor, pilota rahmet dilerken ailesine de başsağlığı diliyorum. Ürdün milletinin de başı sağ olsun diyorum. Böyle bir vahşet olamaz. Böyle bir şeyi kabullenmek mümkün değil. Bunun bizim dinimiz İslam'la yakından uzaktan alakası yoktur.
I'm sure the whole House will join me in condemning the sickening murders in Syria of Japanese journalist Kenji Goto and the Jordanian pilot Lieutenant Moaz Al-Kasasbe. I'm sure the thoughts and prayers of the whole House will be with their families at this very difficult time, and we should also think of our own pilots and their families and all those who serve. I can assure the House that we will not stop until the murderous ISIL extremists behind this and their poisonous ideology are eradicated.
Well, Akbar, I mean, we heard Erdogan and Cameron there saying that they condemned the actions of IS, no surprise there. Erdogan distancing their actions from anything to do with Islam. Cameron calling for support for the pilots that are taking part in the Western intervention. Do you think that this intervention is actually going to be able to turn the tide without them finding some kind of ground forces?
I think the hope is, John, that the ground forces will be these Syrian moderate rebels who are going to be trained in the spring. I think for now, the plan certainly is not to send American or coalition troops into Syria. That certainly is not something that's being discussed here. It's among some opposition figures, but certainly not the president. I think what they're emphasizing, though, is that for these bombing flights, for whether it's Jordanian pilots, for British pilots, the most important thing is figuring out whether there is a plan for Syria moving forward. And I think David Cameron's words about thinking of our men and women in the air, the question is what the UAE said when it pulled out. Does the U.S. have a plan for search and rescue, for helping these pilots who are being shot down over Syria, or could be? And is there a plan for reconciling the future of Syria? I think that is the part of this question that's really gone off, that's really not in the public eye. And when the UAE pulled out its bombers from these missions, it said, we are concerned about Iranian involvement. The Iranian involvement is understood to be one reason why the U.S. and its partners are not taking a more aggressive role in Syria. And until they square the circle of how do we deal with Iran and the Syrian regime while maintaining our coalition against ISIS, they're not going to have widespread support, and they're not going to be able to give, whether it's the bombers or the moderate Syrian rebels, who also do not like Iran, also do not like the Assad regime, the kind of support that they need. So it's a question of dealing with that issue.
Sabah, let's just have a look at the Iraqi side of this equation. We've seen statements from people in the Iraqi government, contradictory statements, I should say, in the last few weeks. One saying it'll take 2 years to win the battle with IS, and another one saying that in a couple of months the Iraqi army will be on the offensive. Are either likely to be true?
Well, certainly, I think those who are talking about liberating the land from ISIS and what have you are talking nonsense. Because if we had Kobani, which is a small village, they were fighting over, I don't know, something like 3 months over it. And at the end of the day, now we have one Kobani, but in fact, Kobani is surrounded by ISIS. So it is still as cut off as it was before. The idea that somehow you can, so to speak, liberate a land which is under ISIS control, which is bigger than the whole of France, and it has a population of something like 20 million people who are under ISIS, and they are suffering from ISIS, and they want to get rid of ISIS, but we are not giving them any alternative. All what we are doing is now we have Belgian planes, Americans, British, Jordanians, Iraqis, Iranians, everybody is bombing schools and hospitals and people and civilian and saying to them, we want to liberate you from ISIS. And they say, okay, fine, so you get rid of ISIS, you get what? You get Maliki soldiers, you get the same militias which are now burning houses in Diyala. So I don't think those people, the politicians who are talking this, they are doing it just as a figure of speech. And even you can see the differences between the Minister of Defense, who said he can do it within a few weeks, and the spokesperson for the Prime Minister or for the cabinet said, well, maybe he was looking a little bit objectively and looking at the positive side of things and being optimistic about it. So it is nothing to do with the case. I think you cannot fight ideology from the air. Ideology are a cause, they are a symptom of a cause. And unless there is justice, there's freedom, and there is stopping meddling from the outside, you will not resolve that situation.
Okay, Sabah Al Mukhtar from the Arab Lawyers Association and Akbar Ahmed from the Huffington Post, thanks very much for joining us. But I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on this topic. Do stay with us for the second part of the show, where we'll be taking a look at the rest of today's top stories and what you've been posting on Twitter. That's after the break.